Poštovane gledateljice i gledatelji, dobar dan. Posljednjih 5 godina u Briselu o europskim fondovima odlučivala je povjerenica Elisa Ferreira. No danas ona više ne obnaša tu funkciju jer je izabrana nova Europska komisija. U današnjem razgovoru 1 na 1 razgovaramo s gospođom Ferreirom o njenom prethodnom mandatu, tijekom kojeg je primjerice sufinancirani Pelješki most dosad najskuplji projekt sufinanciran europskim novcem u Europi. S gospođom Ferreirom također razgovaramo i o budućnosti kohezijske politike i što očekivati nakon što u ured sjedne njen zamjenik. Madam Ferreira, thank you very much for being with us today and hosting us here, in which you might call your second home. So how, in just a few days, you will leave this place. So how do you feel now?
Well, it's mixed feelings. Thank you very much for your interest. There is a sense of having done as much as possible and having, I think, developed a very successful policy. But on the other hand, it is really difficult to leave the place where I have been working and after having engaged so much with countries, with regions, with people. Of course, saying goodbye is always a difficult moment, but the general feeling is of comfort and of being satisfied with the result of what we have done.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your legacy. So what would you highlight as the big achievement during the mandate and what might be better?
Well, I think the most important thing is that I think more and more people, municipalities, regions, countries, recognize that this union is a fantastic project, but that for it to work there are conditions. And these conditions include having a strong and cohesion policy that delivers, that helps all the different countries and regions, in fact, to catch up, to grow faster, and to be capable to accommodate business, good jobs, and to play the game of this internal, strong internal market. And Croatia is one of the countries that performed very well, that used to a very high extent the cohesion policy. And in fact, it shows that progress is there. And if you look at Croatia a couple of years ago, before accession, and now, you can tell the difference. Of course, not everything is perfect, but cohesion policy was present, and I think Croatia used it in a very positive way, basically to increase the qualification of people, the quality of the conditions for enterprises to operate, but also to be able to catch back after crisis. And you had COVID, we all had COVID crisis, we had the consequence of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and you had 2 awful problems, that was the earthquakes, and Europe was there to help. And I think it's very important when you feel that you are not alone and that we all together are stronger.
Yes, Croatia, as you said, used EU funds for the earthquakes. And last month we also saw deadly floods in Spain. So do you think that EU funds will be more used for disasters caused by natural causes in forthcoming months or years? Is it something, a new trend?
No, I don't think we can interpret this support, this exceptional support, as the core of the policy. The core of the policy is to make sure that regions that came later and all the countries that came in the last, after 2004, Croatia was the most recent one, but after 2004, they got into a free competitive market, but coming from a level of income that was very low. And if they remained like that, what we would see was that citizens from these countries would have, in particular the most qualified ones, would just move away from those countries and try to find appropriate jobs in the center of Europe. And that's negative, because you have a contribution from Croatia to give to Europe, not only in tourism, but also in technology, in new industries. You have a role to play. So the cohesion policy and the core of the cohesion policy is an instrument that helps you to prepare your students, to support education as you are doing, but also to solve basic blocking elements such as roads or the bridge that created a link, an internal link. So I think cohesion policy, the core, is to support growth, to support companies, to support good jobs. But then, if there is a disaster and everything collapses, then it is also part of our job to help to catch back. And this happened with COVID, because if we hadn't used funds for that, certain regions, those that depend on tourists, those that depend on exports or imports or industry, they would have just collapsed. That would be a very strong way back in the progress that you are creating. So, but on this, we sustained the risk of crisis of COVID, or of the lack of energy after the war, or the incoming of a lot of Ukrainian refugees. We spent in this about 10-12% of the overall envelope. So we didn't change, we didn't shift the core of what we want to do. We just thought, and we went to the European Parliament, and they agreed, and member states agreed, that under such dramatic circumstances, part of the money should be dedicated to keeping the economy and the society and people alive. And this is very, very real when people were dying, and we are paying, in fact, for vaccines or for work or for schools to be able to buy computers for kids. So this is emergency, but that's not the core of the policy.
In a previous period, the face of EU funds in Croatia might be the Pelješac Bridge, as it was the biggest ever project co-financed by the EU. What do you expect in the current period? I mean, you talk to Croatian officials, they're starting to open some tenders and preparing projects. So what do you expect in this current period until 2027 from Croatia, and what's your...
You know, as countries progress in their development, their conditions for development, you tend to move, or we have to move, from solving obvious problems. And these obvious problems that block development are, of course, connecting infrastructures, or they are clean water, or health, or, roads, or bridges. But as these basic problems are starting to be solved, more and more we have to move into more sophisticated aspects, such as the connection or the link between universities and research centers and the industry. The more sophisticated ways, now we call it complex ways, not in the negative sense, but in the sense of having more value added in everything that you do. And also diversifying and avoiding dependencies from only one industry or one sector. And in fact, what we expect from Croatia is to become more sophisticated, because you already solved a lot of those basic problems. And this doesn't mean necessarily that we are going to move into other industries, but you do industries or other economic activities with more know-how, more technology, whether it is, for instance, tourism with lower impact on environment. If you have the transports between islands, to do it with new technologies that are less polluting. If you want to look at, for instance, you are very well known for the program with schools in which introduced the new technologies with the kids and very, very interesting training and going with the software and hardware. So training teachers, training students, and also changing the technological profile of your education. So you have several points where you can compete reaching for the top and not just keeping things at the, the routine kind of level. This is a challenge. And it is also important that by doing this, we avoid over-concentration of certain areas in order that we avoid congestion costs. You have a lot of concentration on certain coastal areas. You have the area of Zagreb. But it is important that you also look around at the other areas and have a certain concern or strategy of supporting alternative poles that can offer good jobs to people without so many costs of housing, of living, and where they can have a family, raise a family, and that can retain your young and most qualified citizens with a good life in Croatia, and from there competing freely with the rest of the world and, of course, internally inside Europe. So it's more sophistication, more value added, and using the best technologies, and you have all the assets for that, I think, because you have an old tradition, you have a very diversified kind of country and activities, and so I think you have all the conditions to be an example for other countries. I hope so.
At the moment, the European Union has also other priorities since the war broke out in Ukraine. Expenses for defense increased. At the same time, the Union has to repay some debt after the post-COVID time. People talk again about enlargement process. Are you afraid that it will be less money for cohesion policy and all nice projects which you mentioned in forthcoming years?
Well, it depends on the voice of citizens, of countries, of regions, because Europe is this kind of model on which we take decisions together. So the commitment by the President when she was confirmed is that she will protect cohesion policy. Personally, I think that cohesion comes together with the DNA of the European Union from an economic perspective, that is free competition. Because if you have free competition among unequal partners, the winner takes it all. And this is not what we want. Because if a country or if a region starts losing their best and not being able to compete, of course that people start being very, very disappointed with this project. So it is, the two things come together. But let's remember, excuse me, that the European budget represents 1% of the overall wealth of the European Union. It's just 1%. And cohesion policy is 1/3 of 1%. Of course, when we had this big crisis of COVID, we, for the first time, borrowed a huge amount of money, and we kind of created a double. We almost duplicated the budget, long-term budget. And I think we need other resources, own resources, that have been debated. That's not more taxes on people, but probably shifting some of the taxes from the ones that are paying them to the ones that are not paying enough. And all the agenda on asking multinationals for paying also a little bit the OECD agenda that is already on track. I hope it is not forgotten, as well as some of the payments for environment or pollution, the ETS, can give a little bit to the European budget, as well as the protection for, the barriers in relation to those products that get inside the European Union without having the appropriate requirements that inside we ask on our producers. This is just examples, but there were ideas like having a tax on financial transactions, the financial products. So these are issues on which shifting the burden to the ones that are not paying enough might be another solution. It is on the agenda. Let's see how we progress. But I think that we need to protect cohesion policy. If we don't protect cohesion policy, I think we risk fragmenting Europe, and the fragmented Europe is not a strong Europe vis-à-vis China, vis-à-vis the United States, vis-à-vis the rest of the world, and that is reflected in this marvelous thing that we managed to do until now, that's stay together, because only together we can face all these challenges.
Last month we heard a fierce reaction from regional and local leaders when a document was leaked, supposedly from the Commission, not from your department, but from the other one, saying that in the future the cohesion policy might be under the control of central government, so that the EU funds will be linked directly to reforms which central governments would do in their own countries, which means that maybe local or regional governments would not have a big impact on receiving EU fund. What do you think about that? Is that likely?
Well, this leak, so to speak, I never saw the leaked document. I was looking inside, so I cannot find any document. But of course, this rumor, this fear, has triggered the reactions, and it's natural, because I think it should not be lightly or just like that we would kill the core, one of the policies that are a pillar of the European Union. The concern to make, to share the good results of our project comes since the Treaty of Rome. And every time we deepened the integration process, each time we enlarged the European Union, particularly during Delors' time, Jacques Delors was really a builder of Europe as we know it. Always cohesion was reinforced. Now we are faced with more challenges. Even the environment agenda is not equally beneficial to all the regions. We have the enlargement that needs to be addressed. And if we do all these things, our defense, at the expense of the internal development of, in a more convergent way of the different regions, we are bound to create the internal fragmentation of Europe. So I think cohesion policy keeps Europe together. This requires adequate amounts. I already gave you an idea of what we are talking about, but also a certain DNA in the way how we manage it, because cohesion policy is the one that solves the real problems of people. I mean, ask in your country who has not benefited from a cohesion project, because you have the schools, you have the sewage, you have the clean water, you have the roads, you have the railways, you have, it's very difficult to find something new and good that has been built and that is not supported by cohesion policy. Of course, as you progress, as you grow, you'll be using more funding, not necessarily for grants, for free money, because that's what we are talking about. A road or an infrastructure costs 100, and free you get a partner that helps you with 85% of that amount or 50% of that amount and gives you the money, because this is a precondition for you to be able to play. And of course, the growth of Croatia helps others to invest in Croatia, to sell to Croatia, and Croatians to export and also to invest abroad. So this is the kind of win-win that we create. But it is the policy that goes close to the people, that improves the real quality of life of people, And so I think citizens recognize it. And that's why when there is this risk that the policy would be exchanged for something else, people start worrying. And in particular, I think we have got to protect this DNA. I mean, regions and municipalities and people, it's a bottom-up. It's from the ground that you decide what you want to do. You don't decide alone. Then you have an interaction with your own government. And it is this dialogue that puts to value all the territories of a country, all the people of a country. And I would like, even today, the president, when presenting the new commission to the parliament, she quoted Enrico Letta when he says, the right to move is unquestionable. Inside this wonderful, 27-country experiment, you can move, you can work anywhere, you can invest anywhere. But if you don't want to move, if you want to stay, you've got to have the conditions to stay. So the right to move, but also the right to stay. This was a very, I think, inspired way by Enrico Letta, the ex-prime minister of Italy, when he was asked to address the internal market. So created conditions for people also to make a business, a good, profitable business from the place where they were born and where they want to live.
And talking about another Italian politician, Raffaele Fitto, what do you think about him? Your different political affiliations, so what do you expect from his work here? Will that be continuation of your work, or you are on a different position?
Well, I think Europe is made of differences. I think it is important to have a clear separation between those that believe in democracy, that believe in this project, in which we respect each other, in which we protect freedom of speech. And so if we agree around these principles, I think we are Europe is made of exactly exchanging opinions within this broad framework that guarantees citizens the freedoms, democracy, peace, mutual respect. And, of course, in the present circumstance, the position in relation to Russia is, and to those that want to aggress and to kill Europe, even through the digital world, not only physically, but also in more sophisticated ways, is essential. But within this universe of our principles, I think diversity of opinions is absolutely welcome, and it's part of the DNA of Europe as well. Now going into the person, Raffaele Fitto, he's a very experienced politician. He was previously in charge of a region, so he knows the region, the regional problematic, exactly in southern Italy. And I had the opportunity to have a lot of exchanges with him, both when he was a member of the European Parliament, so he knows the European business, then when he became Minister of Cohesion of Italy, and then also when he was appointed a future member of the Commission. So I have full cooperation with him, and I hope he will be able to defend this place-based, bottom-up, multi-level aspect of cohesion policy, because I'm absolutely sure that he knows how important it is to have this cohesion policy active, and having executive vice presidents with this policy, I interpret it also as a recognition of the value attributed by this new college to the cohesion policy. Also, Ursula von der Leyen, she made a commitment when she was confirmed a couple of months ago as the new, again, president of the Commission, that in fact she would protect cohesion policy, she would keep the value of the policy in terms of among the priorities of the European Union, but also that should recognize the countries, the regions, and the local entities as the right interlocutors. So I believe that we will all converge, citizens and representatives, in, of course, making the best of this incredible policy.
One of the things what Fitto said during his hearing in the European Parliament, that it should be imposed like the strict control how the EU funds are used in member states. At the moment we have one ongoing investigation by European investigators in Croatia. So how to secure that EU funds are really used properly in all countries, and what is your experience during your mandate?
Well, in fact, this is a very important question because we are extremely rigid in relation to avoiding fraud. Fraud is a disaster because it's a huge responsibility. Having money that comes from your contribution or mine, that comes from all the citizens. So you have contributions, all of us contribute, and then our responsibility here is to, in a kind of network of responsibility with member states, with the region, with the managing authorities, to use the money to the right objectives, creating jobs, training people, improving the quality of the schools. And it is really a disaster when in this chain that is very complex and it's not easy, but if there is some loophole from where someone, appropriates the funds, or the rules and the transparency and the accountability are not followed. So, fortunately, we have very low levels of fraud. But whenever there is a suspicion, we stop the funding. And of course, there are some investigative bodies for which we transfer the dossier, and then it follows up. It's Olaf, it's known as Olaf, it's the European Public Prosecutor, also the Court of Auditors, but it goes into a kind of a line from the European level, also to the auditors at the member state level and the courts of this, and that's why the quality of all this institution framework is highly controlled by the European Union as well. And of course the beneficiaries and the managing authorities. So it's a chain of responsibility. We have a very low level of fraud. That doesn't mean that we give up on it, but that it is being followed up. It was confirmed as alleged suspicion of fraud. For the overall of Europe, we have 0.57 at this moment in relation to the period of 2014-2020. But of course, we should not, once there is a suspicion, we protect the money, we stop. We can even, in the new period, ask the country to refund the money, the money that is at stake, refer it and
for a concrete project.
Bring it back to the European budget. And of course, there is the normal procedure, criminal procedure with the courts. This is a very, very small percentage. But until we get to this stage, of course, there is a lot of auditing, a lot of research, a lot of work that is done, and a lot of dialogue. When the Court of Auditors publishes error rate, and sometimes people mix the two things, the error rate is most of the times formal errors, not substantive errors, but formal errors. Like, for instance, you filled a form that is not correctly filled, and in those cases, we ask the member state to remove this project if it is something that is not eligible, or to correct formality that is not adequately corrected. And so we end up with very reasonable conformity around, after all these corrections, we end up with lower levels lower than 2% of the overall amount, that have small errors or or there is a paper missing. Having said this, we try to simplify these procedures, and we are working very intensively on making life easier for the beneficiaries, because this concern, that is a real concern, sometimes ends up with a disproportional level of bureaucracy vis-à-vis the support that is given. Getting the right balance is not easy, but we are improving this, particularly in 21-27, which is the funding that is now starting. I mean, it has started already in 21, but usually it takes a bit to speed up the procedures. So we tend to the present support, but in fact, overall, this machinery is quite performant, and it has been producing, I think, amazing changes in Europe, and this is recognized by all those that are outside. Sometimes we are overcritical internally, but from outside, you see a lot of countries desperate to get in. You see the importance of getting in. You see Ukrainians, Moldovians, and around Europe, people that want to join and to be part of this project. So this is sometimes the best proof that the quality of life that we have created for our citizens is in fact something to be protected and to be very, very carefully looked after, because we have gone very, very far with peace, with progress, with democracy, and we have got, all of us, to protect it, because nothing is granted.
Yeah, you mentioned also some countries who are candidate countries like Western Balkan. What is your experience with those countries in the Western Balkans?
Well, we try, I think all this enlargement, it's Balkans, but it's also Ukraine. I know that you are close to that experience, but I think we need, first of all, to make sure that the rules and principles that we follow in Europe and that are registered and enshrined in the treaties, in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, that they are not only agreed by the countries that want to come in, but also that they are translated in real procedures. Sometimes this takes a lot of mutual learning, it takes a lot of time, until you get the confirmation that we actually follow the same rules. And as I told you in the previous answer, also the courts have got to function. The laws have got to be adapted. So, but it's a voluntary process. Nobody is imposing anything on anybody. I mean, people decide, our countries decide if they want to join in or not. So this procedure takes time. But of course, there is also a methodology in the most obvious side, that is support and being able to export. So the economic side, it has a very clear connotation also with the laws that you follow, with your capacity to confirm that you are not going to destroy competition, that there is no state aid, that you follow the rules for security of labor, for environment protection. I mean, it's so many things. So what we call the acquis communautaire, what we have built together, takes a lot of time. Having said this, enlargement is important. It's important for those citizens that will join in, and it is important for the enlargement of Europe, and also for the stability of Europe as a geopolitical entity. And often it is a source of growth, because once you start helping those countries, and you saw it, I mean, there was a value added in all the infrastructures that you did. Some of them were, I mean, if the companies located in Croatia were the winners of the bids, they got business, and a lot of them got a lot of business, but some foreign companies also got some business over there. We hope that the European-based companies are performant enough to win these bids, and that in fact we will end up with this word that is a bit, I mean, now very overused, but that is a win-win situation. That we all gain with enlargement, and of course we are already working with these countries. We have Interreg. Interreg is a program that a lot of you know very well, and this Interreg is a support that works together with another line from NIR, from the Enlargement Commissioner, and together this practice, this way of working together, of understanding each other, of established dialogues, of knowing who is on the other side of the border. That's how we overcame all these wars, terrible wars, that for centuries were the DNA of Europe. Europe was always in wars, and after the Second World War, we realized that, in fact, we had to change completely, and fortunately, we were part of this process and project that started in the late 50s of the past century, and is still performant now. And so I think it's worth fighting for Europe with all the values that are enshrined in the project.
In the last 5 years, you visited all 27 member states. Is there anything which you remember which impacted you in any country or any event or any meeting? Is there anything which you now remember as something which you'll remember for the rest of your life?
Well, it's difficult, and in fact, I have visited the most problematic areas across Europe, because that's what we have to understand in order to be able to help. And of course, I visited, it is true, I visited more than around, including all countries, around 100 regions. I was very shocked, I mean, it was really a drama for me when I saw Zagreb, I mean, and the cathedral and all these beautiful areas. First, the disaster of these earthquakes, but then the reconstruction. And so this is such a relief to see that you can build, you can rebuild, you can create, I mean, positive things, and that you can give hope again to the people there. I also tried in all circumstances to speak with young people, and all across Europe, the most dramatic situations, we need the young people. We need our youngsters. Of course, we need our older people, or the ones that have been young for longer, as I usually say. But we need the energy of the young people. We need them in those areas where the population aged. We need to bring them back, because they have ideas, they have energy, they have a positive look at life. And so I always try to meet the university students, other young people, and I get such an energy from speaking with them. They are so enthusiastic, they are so great, and even in this difficult world, they still find this optimism that we definitely need. But of course, we have to give them conditions for them to settle, to have a family if they so wish. And for this, we need really to create alternative options that move them away from being forced to immigrate and to go to places where even their competencies are not sufficiently recognized. Because when you move away, you are an outsider, so there is so much cost. You go to the big centers are very competitive. Sometimes you don't find adequate housing at adequate pricing. You have problems with education of the children, so everything becomes very, very expensive. And coming from a country of immigrants, I can only appreciate their incredible effort, and also appreciate all those that are able to welcome them and to integrate them. But if we end up with flows of people that we cannot manage, then this creates unintended consequences that are not good for the incoming people and not good for the people that are there. And so I think creating human, decent conditions for everybody is what must be at the core of the material dimension of democracy. Because democracy, if you don't accede to health or to education or to basic, infrastructures, what is democracy? It's just a word. So equal opportunities, but for this we need a network of the willing. And that's what I have found during this period in this mandate.
Even though you're leaving this post, you continue to work with young people with all enthusiasm and optimism. You are going back to your home country, Portugal. You will work as a economics teacher at university. So what are you going to tell your students, and what are you going to do in next few months?
Well, I think there is so much that I've had the opportunity, the incredible opportunity to see and to learn all across Europe. And I think we have got to respect each other and not to impose things without listening to the counter-argument that comes from the people you are working with. Because, I think we all have something to learn from others and to teach to others. And that's what we call dialogue and exchange of experiences and mutual respect. Probably this is the best lesson I took from this already long professional life in different competencies, in different circumstances. But I think mutual respect for the others is at the core of Europe as I perceive it. It is enshrined in treaties, but then it has got to be at the core of our philosophy to live together. But that doesn't mean having no ambition. Yes, we have got to be very ambitious, but to implement things in this kind of philosophy, respect for the others, listen to the others, and learn what the others have to teach us.
Are you happy to go back to the university?
I am, because sometimes also this is an issue at the university. People are in the university and often they fall into this trap of just speaking to each other, publishing in very sophisticated magazines, and forgetting that the final purpose of this is to contribute to improvements in the production process, in the companies, in the way you organize transports, in the way you organize the production of all the different products, be it agriculture, be it services, be it industry. And so this coming outside, learning from practice and bringing practice into the university is, from my point of view, essential. We look at the Americans. The Americans do it very well. And also the financial sector has this capacity to evaluate risk from a perspective that is not, unfortunately, the typical way for Europe to address risk and to address investment. I think also Croatia is starting to use what we call financial instruments, that is guarantees, loans, and we need to multiply the amount of money that exists, that is grants, by using these more sophisticated instruments and more market-based instruments, which are in fact also part of the future of cohesion for countries that have already reached a certain level of development and have overcome all the basic infrastructural problems. So I think all this triggers reflection. So my objective will be to stimulate the thinking of these people and to make them, of course, do pure research, but also do applied research and interconnect with the real economy in a way that helps us to retain our young, qualified people and to be more competitive internationally, which requires that all the territories and everybody is pushed to the top of their capacities and avoids being comfortable with the routine that is really a danger that comes often with a sense of security. And we have got to be very alert to the life that is to what is happening inside and outside our small universe. So I'm very glad, and I think it's good to be to confront what you think, what you develop in the academia with what you know and you test in the real life. And to make this connection is, I think, an important contribution to the quality of our common understanding of life and improving, of course, the life of Europeans.
Commissioner Ferreira, thank you very much. We hope that your work will be fruitful with this enthusiasm at university in Portugal. Thank you very much for hosting us here. It was a pleasure to talk to you, as always, and all the best in your future work.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your interest on the policy. And we have worked together during these 5 years with you and your colleague journalists, with the mayors, with the presidents of regions, with prime ministers. And I have to thank all of you, but in particular thanking the media, when the media cares about going into the true issues and tries to make them visible near the citizens that have so many other things to think about. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Poštovane gledateljice i gledatelji, ovo je bio još jedan razgovor, još jedan intervju 1 na 1. Do idućih europskih susreta i razgovora, srdačan pozdrav iz Brisela.